Hello, this is Robert Whitaker with Imaginalis. Welcome to Unlocking the Potential of HDVI in a Veterinary Practice. To tell you a little bit about who we are at Imaginalis, we are one of the leading veterinary imaging companies on the planet. We have 3 different platforms that we sell, the Vimago, PICO, and PICO platforms, all world-class engineered from Italy. Our manufacturing facility is nestled in a small community just outside of Florence called Sesto Fiorentina. We've got over 500 plus of these units installed around the world. The first one on the screen here is the Vimago GT30. This machine is about 7.5 feet long and about 5 feet wide. It doesn't fit in every space in veterinary hospitals, but it fits in most. This is the PICO GT30. It is exactly the same scanner as the Vimago, but it has a different patient bed. And it comes in 2 different pieces rather than in a single piece, with the patient bed and the gantry integrated in the Vimago. The PICO has the patient bed and the gantry able to separate. So this is easier for facilities that have tight corners that we need to get around during installation. Also, those facilities that are have imaging on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th story, this unit can fit in an elevator nicely and go up to multiple different floors. Our units, all of them, you will notice, have wheels on them, which means they can move between rooms as well as move into the facility very easily. The way you see these in the photos is exactly how they come out of the crate. This is our largest unit. This is the PEGASO Evolution. This unit was developed for equine use, but it also is used in zoos and aquariums around the world. Epicare is our support service and maintenance program at Imaginalis. We have experienced field technicians supporting all of our clients around the clock 365 days a year. Epicare is also a program that covers 100% of the parts, the labor, and the travel of our field tech. This also comes with software updates and 1 annual preventive maintenance visit. So what is the Vimago? What is the PICO? What is the PEGASO? It's called high definition volumetric imaging, or HDVI. It's very similar to cone beam CT technology. It's X-ray based technology, like all computed tomography is, but it's utilizing a flat panel detector. That's where it is similar to cone beam CT, but there's so many things that make it different and better than typical cone beam CT. We're capturing multiple 2-dimensional radiographs or projection radiographs as we rotate around the patient. We're capturing 700 or more of these projections, depending on how we set the machine, to produce a 3-dimensional volumetric data set. We hold over 30 patents on this hardware and this software. So here is an illustration that will show you what is inside the donut of our CT, or what we call the gantry. There is a source at the very top that emits X-ray photons. There is, of course, the patient bed, and then underneath the patient bed is the flat detector panel that receives those photons as they pass through the patient. And of course, like I said earlier, we're doing over 700 of these projection radiographs to give us a 3D data set. Now, the way slice CT scanners or traditional CT scanners are built, and the way they were developed a long time ago, over 40 years ago, they were developed for human use. And a lot of used human CT scanners came into veterinary early 2000s, late 90s. But this is what the data sets look like. So, the human CT goes around and around really fast and captures you in slices, whereas the Imaginalis, Vimago or PICO or Pegaso will rotate around you very slowly and gather whole data information. So a slice CT from the human side can take 30 seconds to scan an entire human chest or abdomen. For us to scan, let's say, a German Shepherd with our technology, it takes us about four minutes or so to get from the nose to the tail of the German Shepherd and assemble the animal into a complete 3D scan. So while Vimago or the HDVI technology may be slower, we have some other advantages over slice CT. For instance, we need one single room and about 100 square feet. A slice CT is going to need a lot more room. It's going to need 2 separate rooms and about 300 square feet minimum. Shielding is required in those rooms for both technologies. Anytime that we're using X-rays or X-ray radiation, shielding is usually required. The electrical demand of a slice CT is 480 volts, 3-phase. This is highly expensive to bring into a veterinary practice if the building does not already have it. Sometimes just bringing this 480 volt electrical into a vet clinic can cost half as much as the CT itself costs. The electrical that is demanded for the Imaginalis systems is 220 or 230 volts single phase. Most of your slice CTs from the human are in a fixed location like a truck, or they're in a radiology suite. Our units can also go onto a truck or in a radiology suite, but they can also be moved into surgery, or they can be moved into a treatment or dentistry suite. As said earlier, slice CT captures in slices. Contrast resolution is what we talk about when, what's the resolution look like in terms of different shades of gray? How can you differentiate the tissues and what you see on the screen? So a contrast resolution for a slice CT is going to be optimized for humans mainly over 20 kilograms in weight, whereas the contrast resolution for our unit is calibrated and optimized for small animals, which would be anything under 35 kilograms. So we're optimized for a completely different creature than your typical everyday slice CT is. That's why we do so well with imaging small creatures all the way down to, the size of a mouse. Spatial resolution is how small can we see. So slice CT has a spatial resolution of about 5 millimeters down to 1.25 millimeters. That's as small as it can see, which is pretty small. But the spatial resolution of the Imaginalis units begins at 0.600 millimeters, or essentially what we would call 600 microns, and goes all the way down to 100 microns, depending on how we set the machine. So they have a really fast scan speed, and they cover internal medicine, spine, and orthopedics for humans. We have a really slow scan speed, but we're covering dentistry, orthopedics, spines, internal medicine for all creatures. And on top of that, we've also got a function in the unit called fluoroscopy, which is like live X-ray. We have another function in the unit, which is digital radiography, essentially taking flat film X-rays. We can do that with this machine on top of it being a CT. We do 2 other functions. So if you were to compare what the images look like on an animal, let's say a dog, from a slice CT to one of our Vimago or PICO units, this is what you would see on the screen. If you look at the images on the left, the far left image is the axial view. It looks like you're staring down a tube at the animal. That is called the axial view, and slice CT looks really good in that view because of the spiral slices it's capturing. but when you look at the view from overhead or when you look at the view of the data from the side, those are blurry. When you look at the 3 different planes in the Vimago image over to the right, also of a dog, you see all 3 of those planes very clearly. This is the difference in capturing whole density 3D information versus slice information. Here's another example of the same concepts being contrasted one against the other. The left being the Toshiba Slice CT and the right being the Imaginalis Vimago on a dog. Not the same dog, mind you. Fluoroscopy, as I stated earlier, is also a part of the Vimago, PICO, and Pegaso offerings, meaning you can turn on the fluoroscopy mode, put the animal in the field of view, and you can watch live as the animal eats a contrast agent and swallows it. Now, this specific case, this kitty couldn't swallow unless she turned her head to the right. As she turns her head to the right, her esophagus will unstricture and release the food bolus that she was just eating. So she wouldn't be able to swallow without turning her head, but how would we know unless we had fluoro? So this is something that's a huge benefit. Fluoro is also beneficial for coughing, collapsing tracheas, contrast angiography. Some interventional applications for fluoro would be, of course, evaluating not only the trachea and lungs, but deploying what's called a stent in a collapsing trachea. So sometimes a treatment for a collapsing trachea is to deploy a stent to hold the trachea open. And that gets done by using fluoro to guide the procedure. You can also utilize fluoroscopy interventionally in orthopedic surgeries or also in renal or urogenital bypasses. So where the rubber meets the road here, when you start looking at HDVI technology, what makes it so much more valuable to veterinarians is the fact that radiographs have never been enough. Flat film x-rays, they can take us only so far. If you look at these x-rays on screen right now of this dog was clinically presenting with a lot of pain. You could not touch the dog's back with your hands and not get a reaction out of the dog. She was so painful. So they took x-rays. And we happened to be installing the Vimago at this practice the same day that this was going on, that this dog came in. And they decided, you know what, we've got this brand new CT. Let's scan the animal. But they also took x-rays. Well, as you can see across, veterinarians can see when they look at these 4 views, that there's really not anything in these x-rays that's explaining why this animal is painful. Now what I'm going to show you is what the Vimago saw. The Vimago was able to see things in the bones that the x-ray just wasn't picking up because it wasn't A, seeing it at the right angle, B, not seeing it in volume. So essentially what we have here is osteomyelitis in the bones, in the vertebra. And you can see the holes here. As you look up and down the spine bones, you'll see these holes come in and out in this video. Down here at the lumbar, up here at the thorax. So the radiographs essentially were underrepresenting the reality that was happening in the animal. There was a lot more going on that we just could not see with x-rays. And that is what makes this technology so valuable to veterinarians. We cannot get the animal to talk to us and say, hey, my back hurts. So good imaging in a veterinary hospital helps a lot. But imaging like this is a game changer. So the Phoenix viewer is the viewer that comes with our technology for reviewing the images. So you get images like this 3D in color that are amazing. And this is what it looks like on the screen when a veterinarian captures the image data set for a rabbit. This is a rabbit. And this is what the skull of the rabbit looks like after the scan. So they can look at each of these teeth in this scan and determine the health of these teeth. The color 3D is pretty and beautiful, and it's good for show and tell, but we're always going to diagnose off of the grayscale 2D images. Here is a avian patient. This is an African gray, and I have the 3D view up here, and we can do all kinds of manipulations with it. But again, the 3D view is beautiful. And a lot of our diagnosis typically isn't going to come from 3D, but we're going to be able to show those diagnoses from 3D once we reach them by evaluating in 2D like we are here. But we can see everything inside this bird that radiographs weren't going to ever show us inside this bird. We can see things in very exquisite detail. Here is a dog captured by a PICO, and this dog has some serious issues going on. There's a problem with an adrenal gland being extremely large, and there's also an issue going on with vascular hepatopathy in the liver. But we're getting amazing detail in this abdomen on this dog because we're using contrast medium with a PICO scan. And right there at front and center is your gigantic adrenal gland next to the kidney. Of course, you can see all this in 3D also. We'll get a big blown up version of it right here in 3D. And I'm going to point to it with my mouse in this presentation, but right there's your gigantic adrenal next to the kidney right there. So let's talk about what kind of requirements have to happen for the facility to get one of our units. Well, we like to see a floor plan with the intended location. You know, where do you want it? What room do you want it in? Because we got to figure out how, if we deliver a unit to that facility, how are we going to get it into that room? We send a pre-installation checklist for people to walk through so you don't miss anything. You know, you have to make sure that we have power and data and all those things accounted for that we need for the operations of this machine. A state certified radiation physicist will generate some kind of a shielding plan for you for the room if you hadn't done that already. A lot of veterinarians already know to do this when they do renovations or construction. There has to be an electrical plan with your electrician, and then of course a data and IT management plan has to be implemented as well. Are you using a PACS system to store your digital x-rays and your ultrasound scans already? And if so, you can just start storing our stuff with that too, but you may need to purchase more capacity. So that needs to be talked about in detail. So here's the electrical connection. It's a 230 volt, 30 amp, single phase wall plug that locks. So when you plug the unit into this outlet, it twists to the right and then it locks. So that if somebody happens to, God forbid, walk across the cord, then it's not going to pull it out of the wall. Now we try to install these units where people aren't walking across the cord. Data connection, Cat5 or Cat6, pretty straightforward. Of course, we want everyone to also have all of their radiation safety PPE available, just like they do in their x-ray room. Training is something that's a big part of having one of these machines. We deliver the machine, we install the machine and calibrate it, and then a few days later, one of our expert training personnel shows up, either a veterinarian or one of our specialist RVTs, registered veterinary technicians. They'll spend 2 days working with up to four people on the operations of the machine and training on how to use and scan and position patients. Continuing education is something else that we prioritize here at Imaginalis. Every year we have the Imaginalis Scientific Congress over at our office in Italy. A lot of our users that are in the European space and have our machine are going to this Congress every year. Some Americans are starting to go over there now and attend this Congress as well. It's held in every April. And that pretty much concludes today's presentation on the Vimago and the PICO from more or less a small animal and exotic perspective. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to get in contact with me.